exactly is the value and the objective of our existence? The only living creature who has the ability to make choices, that their behavior is not purely instinctive, is the human being. The human being was given and endowed by God with the power of choice. And therefore, because we have control over our behavior, if a person chooses to do something positive, something of value, something which is contributory, that action is attributed to the person himself, and he's a full beneficiary and deserving of reward for that decision which he had made to do the positive action. On the other hand, if a person, although he's inclined, and we're all inclined because we're physical beings, to do things which are contrary to spirituality, if we choose to rein in on our inclinations and suppress the desire or the need for certain things, we are full beneficiaries of that. But if we submit and succumb to our inclination, the only reason why the wrong was done or the wrong was perpetrated is because we chose to relinquish our control over our behavior. And that's why the person is fully liable for that action, which is a negative action, and fully deserving of the choice, which is a positive choice, known as a good deed, a mitzvah, whether it's between man and God and man and his fellow. Maimonides had compiled the 13 tenets of Jewish belief. And he writes that one of the tenets of Jewish belief is reward and punishment. That for the good deed, we will be rewarded, and for the failing and the misdeed, the transgression, will be punished. And this is the value and the purpose of a human being's existence. Because at the end of one's life, when you come before the heavenly tribunal, the heavenly court, one's record is evaluated, and God will make a decision whether you succeeded or, God forbid, you failed. Yet we find something very interesting. The 10 plagues in Egypt were revealed miracles. The first plague, for instance, was the plague of blood, where Aaron was told by Moshe to extend his staff over the water of Egypt, and all the water in Egypt turned to blood. The fish in the Nile died. Pharaoh attributed this to sorcery, to witchcraft. He turned his back on God. The first 5 plagues, in each one of them, the Torah tells us, Pharaoh hardened his heart. The third plague going forward, even the greatest sorcerers of Egypt said to Pharaoh, this is not sorcery. This is the real thing. This is the finger of God. This was from the plague of Kenim, lice, going forward. So Pharaoh understood that this is God's action. It's God's reprimand. God is displaying his power over existence. And Pharaoh is not willing to submit. And he defies God. And this continues for the 4th, 5th. When we come to the 6th plague, the Torah tells us God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, which indicates that Pharaoh no longer had free choice. So from the 6th plague going forward through the 10th, Pharaoh had no choice. You would say, he was basically a puppet. He had no control over his behavior. And yet, Pharaoh was held culpable, liable, responsible for that statement that I will not allow your people to leave. And for that defiance. So Maimonides asks, why should he be held responsible and liable for his behavior where he had no control over that behavior? There's a famous answer which Rambam Maimonides answers in his magnum opus, the Yad Chazaka, in the Laws of Repentance. And he writes that free choice, that man is able to control through his own decision process, his behavior, positive and negative. This is a gift of God. This is an endowment. And if one abuses that endowment, one could have it withdrawn from him. It's a privilege. For instance, you have a child. He has privileges, and he abuses those privileges. The father says to the son, you cross that line one more time, I will withdraw that privilege. And the child crosses that line. The father withdraws the privilege. From that moment forward, the child no longer has the privilege. Of course, the father's withholding the privilege. But why doesn't the child have that privilege? Because the child chose not to have the privilege by crossing the line which he was forewarned not to cross that line. Identically, free choice is a privilege. If you cross that line too many times and you assume a classification which is based on God's evaluation, when you cross that line too many times of evil, then God says, you forfeited that privilege. Pharaoh, after witnessing 5 revealed miracles, and yet his behavior was defiant and pompous and arrogant, knowing that God said differently, God says, you will no longer have choice because you've chosen to forfeit your choice.